All right, so back again on Jets FM on EOFN as the New York Jets. Well, as fans, Jan, we had a week, a little bit more than a week, to dream about the possibility of a season, and I guess we've got another week. We got one last week as the Jets get embarrassed on Monday night. Look, whether you lose by 3 or by 30, and we'll get into the whole context of everything regarding what the loss means and personnel and all that other stuff and coaching. Fact is, whether you lose by 3 or lose by 30, we kind of felt the Jets were going to lose. If they split Dallas, New England, kind of thought that would be the case. What would that mean for the rest of the season? Jets are 1-5. The big debate I guess we have to have is, and what the administration is going to have is if they beat Jacksonville with the deadline 2 days later, the trade deadline, and they sit there, let's say at 2-5. If they're 1-6, there's nothing to even think about. But if you're 2-5, and you see Miami, Giants, Washington, Oakland, Cincinnati, Miami on your upcoming schedule, do you try to hold on to everything and think, you know what, taking a look at the rest of the AFC, we might have a shot at a playoff here? Or do I try to recoup some draft picks and trade off some players that we may not want on the team next year, whether it's Leonard Williams, Robbie Anderson, and so forth?
I'm sorry, I was actually listening to the ghosts in the background, so give me 1 second to kind of recalibrate
very
there.
Nice.
But no, look, let me tackle a couple of things. First of all, yes, there is a material difference between losing by 3 and getting wholeheartedly embarrassed on Monday Night Football. I mean, the whole nation is watching you, and you got completely roasted. Coming off a nice win, coming off a win that you and I spoke about, should hopefully be a bridging off point towards the remainder of the season, regardless of where we end up. And to end up like that is kind of embarrassing. And we just got absolutely taught a lesson where it was almost like a Pee Wee team playing against an NFL team. The issues you and I have discussed, the offensive line was sieve-like, which is resulting in the Darnold comment. The game plan was non-existent. The defense wasn't particularly good at all. I mean, they were just basically manhandled in every single way, shape, or form in that game. Now, that said, to me, look, we can probably spin it at 2-6 that they have a realistic shot. But if you're going to, the line I think from years ago where I think it was the 1950 AAFC game, the Browns versus the Eagles, and I think the Browns destroyed the Eagles, and the Eagles' comment is it was like, we just went up against a big league team. That's almost what it was like there. They went against a big league team and got shown that they're not ready for that. So I think the issues go a lot broader than just beyond if they are going to trade anybody, and the guys I think we would want to trade. A lot of them wouldn't bring back any return either, because I don't think a lot of them are going to be very much wanted on the open market. I think the bigger question is starting to be asked, and I think it may be slightly premature, but not tremendously premature, is Adam Gase the right guy for this team?
All right, anyway, let's go back to... I'm not going to talk about that.
Wait. All I said was it's probably a bit premature is what I said. But
it is premature.
I think not
they can talk about
addressing
it on
it
another
is
show.
ignoring.
Not going to talk about
is
it.
ignoring it. My point is, look. Wait.
With this schedule, if they win 2 games out of this 7, we'll talk about it.
Well, let me say, I think I think both you and I would love to deal Trumaine Johnson.
Well,
you're not finding a taker.
Trumaine Johnson.
You can't, right? You're not finding a taker.
It's got to
right?
be Leonard Williams or Robbie Anderson.
Correct. And Anderson
could probably get you back. I would, maybe
4th rounder.
Maybe Leonard Williams could get you back a 2nd rounder.
Is that enough?
You tell me. For me, it is.
I still think
this
Williams,
is if they lose to Jacksonville.
I think Williams could be part of the team moving forward. I think the bigger thing that they have to determine is the contract he's going to expect going to be so far beyond what they're willing to pay him that they're just going to recoup something for an asset they're going to lose anyway. And what is that line in the sand point, right? If somebody offered you a 3rd rounder, is that enough? If somebody offered you a 5th rounder for Anderson, is that enough? And part of the problem is look, Anderson had a great game 2 weeks ago. Is that real or is that fiction? Is that an aberration?
Wait. If what you're saying is, and again, this is only if the Jets lose to Jacksonville. Okay? That's the point of this. Meaning the season is over. So if the season's over, then what you're saying is, see, it doesn't matter what they get back for these guys if the season's over. The question is, do they want to re-sign them? Because if they don't want to re-sign them and the season's over, you get what you can. You just go ahead and
Exactly.
trade Anderson,
Right.
get a fifth. You
Correct.
trade Leonard and get a third.
Correct.
So, but
I
the
would
question
agree with
is,
that.
what would you rather? Do you think Leonard Williams or Robbie Anderson should be part of the future, knowing where Williams' number is going to be high? He's what do you make? $14 million this year, so his number is going to be high. Robbie Anderson is a difficult situation because he's crazy if he thinks he's making anything. So I don't think the Jets have to worry about paying Robbie Anderson. I mean, what does he think he's going to make? Unless Robbie Anderson thinks that he can make $6 million or $7 million somewhere, because the Jets shouldn't give him anything more than what they're already giving him now, which is $3 million.
I think Williams is the more likely candidate to go if the season's gone south. I would say less so from Anderson. But as you said, if his ask is going to be unrealistic and the Jets have a sense as to what that ask is going to be, then by all means you need to get something for an asset you're not going to utilize and start building up the depth, because you know it's a lost season, and keeping those guys around is not going to make a difference between, let's say, going 3-13 and let's say 4-12.
Oh, absolutely, because at this point you would prefer, knowing you're going to miss the playoffs at 1-6 after losing to Jacksonville, you got to think realistically about, sure, we're going to try to win on the field, but hey, if I don't have Robbie Anderson here, or if I don't have Leonard Williams here, it's just going to make it harder to win. Sort of like what the Dolphins are doing. We're not going to try to lose. The coaches aren't trying to lose, but if they don't have the players on the field, it's going to make it harder for them to win, which means you have a better draft status, which is really what we want if we're 1-6.
Right, but at some point in time, you and I have both talked about there's a couple of things. First of all, the draft status is wonderful and good, but there's only so long you can start banking off draft status before you start losing a fan base. Secondly, as we've seen, the picks that they've made with those high choices, if you look back at the last several years, well, yeah, different, correct. But again, I think you have to have that. That has to be a factor, right? We both.
Yeah, but we need draft picks. Don't you agree? We need draft picks.
We definitely need draft picks. I mean, Williams was one of those that was very highly touted, and we took him at 6. We all thought we got a steal.
Sure.
Right now, that looks to be not the case. Adams at 6 clearly was I wouldn't say a steal, but they got substantive value for the pick that they made. Darnold, the jury may still be out a little bit, but I think both you and I believe he is a franchise quarterback. And Quinnen Williams, we finally started to see some signs, at least the last couple of weeks now that he's come back, in terms of what kind of disruptive force he can be. So, yes, assets are needed, and assets in the term of draft picks. And the hope has to be that Joe Douglas is a good enough talent evaluator that if you're going to spend money on free agency, you're going to spend it wisely and bring in guys that uplift the talent base enough to get you over the hump from being a potential team that has a shot at making the playoffs and a consistent playoff contender and beyond.
We said it last week, and it even after beating Dallas, and it was really thrown back in our faces this week in an ugly way, which is how this roster has been exposed by the injuries. Not just the Darnold injury that exposed us, but even when Darnold came back, when we stepped up on a competition and played the defending champs. And by the way, the thing that bothers you, it bothers me. It bothers me to no end that, and this is why I hope when Brady leaves, Belichick still hangs around, because I want payback. But it bothers me to no end that Belichick and or Brady, but definitely Belichick, he's got 2 games a year he cares about. Jets and Jets. He wants to kill us every time he coaches us. And it bothers me to no end that that's the case, because we watch this team play against teams like the Redskins and the Giants, and they look like they could care less. Yeah, they play like crap, and they barely win because, we'll just step up and make a couple of plays. But then they play us, and it's the Super Bowl. And they're so focused, and they want to ram everything down our throats, and they usually do when things aren't going well for us. So that bothers me to no end that that's the case, that what we have to deal with. But that's why I said we'll get him back, hopefully, if Brady's not around in a few years and when we're better. But throwing that apart, what he did is he showed us once again, when you take a look at this offensive line, I mean, Semele and Beachum, if they're playing well, it has the best case scenario. It's an average line. You take Beachum out and you put your rookie at left tackle, You put Brandon Shell back in the lineup. You put Lewis in for Assembly. I'm like, it's no wonder how bad that offense looked. And then the receiving situation without Herndon and without Anunwa. Robbie Anderson and his one-trick pony moves, and we got a slot guy. That's it. I mean, it's really no wonder that when that defense, which is probably the best defense I've ever seen out of Belichick in all his years, goes up against that offense, it's no wonder we get the result that we got on Monday night, and it's embarrassing, but it's a good thing because it shows what this team needs to do to get better.
So let me address a couple of points. So the Belichick, I mean, you and I both know why he loves sticking it to this team. I mean, it stems clearly back from the way it was handled and or mishandled, depending on your view, in terms of him being hired as the head coach.
Yeah,
and
God forbid we
wanted
wanted him to be our head coach, right?
Well, there's obviously a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that went on. That some of it came out,
but it's like,
and it wasn't handled particularly well. And granted, he, as you said, he loves sticking it to this organization, which is why when they beat him in the playoffs under Mark Sanchez, unfortunately, it was the high point because they forgot to show up the first half the following week. And they were so emotionally charged from the win. That was the end result of it. And normally, look, a couple of years ago, they beat him on the Decker touchdown in overtime, which was a sweet win. But the problem is you can count on one hand those wins as opposed to the number of losses. And as you said, the offensive line was sieve-like. I mean, Darnold was under duress the entire game. And I am joking. First of all, let me touch the ghost comment. Every quarterback, you heard Favre say it, sees ghosts.
Stupid.
There's videos of guys thinking they're going to get hit and they go down. The way the good ones rebound from it and are able to put it behind them and use it as fuel to the fire and become better. This is something I think we think of that Darnold has the intestinal fortitude to go ahead and do it, right? I think, but you do know that we did know, you look on the interceptions he threw, 3 of them at least, guys were open. He just couldn't step up. He couldn't throw the ball to get the ball to them, but he had plays that could have been made. The offensive line you and I spoke about in the preseason was a question mark. Even with Ryan Khalil being brought on board as a question mark, Khalil hasn't played well. He's been hurt also, which hasn't helped at all. And Belichick, as you said, their defense is probably the best that it's been potentially underneath him, maybe since early in the Brady regime.
The Teddy Bruschi
since
era.
he's gotten there.
Yes.
Right. So that Richard Seymour and Bruschi and all those guys. So he's got a defense that's better than the one that won the championship, which makes them an even scarier team, despite the fact that they don't have the receiving crew without Gronkowski, but now they just went out and got Mohamed Sanu. So you talk about Anderson going. I think Sanu is a more nuanced receiver, for lack of a better term, than Anderson. It's just Anderson's a one-trick pony. Sanu is going to be a guy who'll go in the slot, he'll find open spaces, which is what you need as opposed to Anderson, which is why they were able to get back as much as they did Atlanta. If they're going to make a move, the Jets have to use that as the model and try to get something back for Anderson. But look, hopefully Brady retires before Belichick. I could see Belichick loves a challenge. We'll see how much he loves a challenge if he hangs around when Brady goes. But he did, he was there when Matt Castle was the quarterback and somehow found a way to win 10 games on the Castle, who parlayed that into a big contract.
Who won the division that year.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So that's the hope. I mean, obviously there's got to be the combination of Brady retiring and Darnold in his 5th and 6th year, and he's now one of the top quarterbacks in the league, and then we can go ahead and stick it to them. But that's obviously the way that these two guys, especially Brady, keep playing every year. That's wishful thinking. What it shows, though, offensively, again, I look at the offensive line now, and I think it's obvious that they have to bring in 4 new starters. 3 definite, maybe 4. Adoga's the only guy that hopefully sticks on. I don't know if he's a left tackle or a right tackle, but he sticks on. They got to get 4 offensive linemen. Winters, who has another year left on his contract, they'll be able to save $7.5 million if they want to let him go. Khalil's making $3 million. Beachum, $8 million on his final deal. And Assembly, they can cut and save $11+ million. So you're talking, if it's those 4 guys, which it could be, you're talking about almost $25 million right there with those four linemen. The Assembly thing is so disturbing because I don't know what's going on, which is a good thing. We talked about that. We really don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it's annoying. I mean, I haven't heard the Jets doctors in a bad way. This is the first time I've ever heard anything like this before with this organization. And Osemele, maybe this is the reason why we got him. I'm willing to think that that's probably the case. I can't imagine he's going to be on the team next year.
I would be absolutely shocked, especially since he's still considering having surgery, and the team has not authorized and signed off on that surgery.
And look what's happening to us in these games.
Yep.
I mean, if that doesn't bother you, if you're not a team player, knowing that you can go out there and play, and this is what's going on, then who needs you? So we need four offensive linemen.
The team is presuming he can play, right? This is one of those gray areas where the team has one view, the player has another view, and he did try to suit up, and he wasn't that effective for the last couple of weeks when he was playing with the injury. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to say that the player is wrong based upon what he feels he can put himself through to try to play and try to be successful. And part of that could be we haven't talked about it. You could be impacted by record, right? If you were 5-2,
absolutely,
you may have a much better likelihood of suiting up and playing with a harness or something else,
absolutely,
as opposed to 1-5, especially when you're looking out for your future livelihood.
It happens every year. That's why you take a look at teams that are not going to the postseason. Take a look at their injury report. See the difference between how big the injury reports are for losing teams and how small they are for playoff teams. It's not a coincidence. So that's the one focus, no question. The other focus is got to be getting the big-time receiver. That's going to be because you got your quarterback now. You've got your running back. You have your tight end, but you need to get some depth at this receiver position. And I don't think it's a very hard position to find talent. You just have to go out and do it. And I'm not saying it all has – you go out – no, I don't know if you go out and get a veteran star – because you're probably going to need to use those early draft picks on linemen. But if there's a superstar type receiver sitting there in the first or second round, I'm not gonna think that that's not the way to go. But they got to get somebody in here, and whether Robbie Anderson stays or not, and if he's willing to stay and make a few million a year, fine. I think he's a key part of the team because of what he can do in the deep passing game. But they've got to find that go-to guy that Sam Darnold can grow with over the next 5 or 6 years.
I think there's no question. I think we saw that this year. I mean, we thought Anuna would be his safety blanket to a certain extent based upon his size and his ability to get open and his ability to maybe get chunk plays to move the chains. Losing him took a major weapon away from the Jets. And then he also played well off of Anderson because he can slot in to that vacated space a little bit behind Anderson if Anderson's going deep. Now, without that, and Crowder's good in the slot, you have lost that ability. And Anderson's looking right now clearly not like a number one, maybe a 2 or even a 3, depending on your view with him in terms of what he can bring to an offense. But they're going to need, if not 1, at least 2 receivers, and you could even look at potentially 3. I mean, Crowder will be here. And Nunwa, his career might be over based upon where the injury took place because of the neck injury.
Enough of him.
And Anderson may not be back. So you're looking to have to add several receivers and several offensive linemen and probably guys at the defensive line. So Joe Douglas is going to have his work cut out for him this offseason.
Yeah, I don't look. The thing is with Anderson, if he stays and doesn't get traded, the only way he's going to make the kind of money that he thinks he could make is he's going to have to play really well. So if he plays really well and the Jets win some ball games, then okay, then we can revisit this at the end of the year. If he doesn't play really well and just plays like the way he's played the last few years, then there's no way he's going to get any of that money on the open market anyway. I'm sure he'll wind up staying, and he'd be a nice piece to go along with Crowder and with Herndon. I'm taking a look at the R-Lads. See, this is the R-Lads showing it on the screen, the early draft booklet I got in the mail. And there are probably right now 5 premier receivers that could be first-rounders. And I'm only bringing it up because these 4 of them potentially playoff teams. You got the 2 guys in Alabama, Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs. And you got T. Higgins, who's got the 6'4" size at Clemson. And you also have CeeDee Lamb from Oklahoma. So when you're watching big college football games this season, the rest of the season, keep an eye on those guys specifically as some receiver targets, because that's something the Jets are desperately going to need. But I think for the first time in a long time, in my view, it's time to now completely rebuild that offensive line before you even think about a receiver. Because look, the Patriots can win, and several teams can win without star receivers. That's not the. It'd be nice. It's a bonus, but the Jets have got to their priority free agent number one, offensive line, and their first round draft pick should be, if as long as it's slotted properly, offensive line.
Unless you are that high of a draft pick and it makes sense to take a different spot. It's not always easy
Sure.
taking a
Yeah.
offensive lineman with, let's say, a top 5 to 10 pick.
Yeah, he'd have to be a superstar. Yeah.
Right.
Sort of
Right,
like what the Colts got.
Like a Quentin Nelson would be phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Somebody of that ilk would be the guy you'd kind of want to get at that position.
So, and in general, as far as, again, like I said, with the rest of the schedule, this is it. I'm a little bit surprised the Jets are a 7-point dog because I'll ask Mark Lawrence. I'll have him on Friday from Covers. Ask him what the line was before the Patriot game. I would think the line was probably close to 3, maybe. It's up to 7 now just because of one game. So there's no way the Jets are like, if the Jets are a 7-point dog to a rookie late round draft pick in Jacksonville. And we actually don't cover that spread, that we do have problems, believe me, because I don't think we're that bad. I just think that the Patriots killed us because the Patriots can kill us. And yes, we have to get this offensive line straightened out for the Jacksonville game in some respect. But I think if they can beat Jacksonville, then next week when we talk, we'll talk about the schedule realistically and talk about the possibility of them maybe making a run. But that's it. The rest of the season is down to one game next week. Win, you got a shot to make a run. Lose, and everything else is about rebuilding, maybe making a couple of trades at the deadline. Because by the time we come on the air next Wednesday, the deadline will be will come and go, and we'll find out whether the Jets trade anybody.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, as you said, a lot of it could be dependent on this week. I'm not sure. I wouldn't necessarily use this week as a determination whether to make a deal or not to make a deal. It would be nice to maybe make a run, but the end-all and be-all has to be the long-term growth of this team. And if the viewpoint is, as we talked about, that neither Williams nor Anderson are parts of this team moving forward, or those you would consider being parts of this team moving forward, then I think the right thing to do is to move them, get components you can use for future assets, and then play with what you got for the remainder of the year, even though it's going to hurt the depth of a team that already is lacking depth.
Yeah, I think what it is if you win, then you're not going to give those players away. Then you're going to be like, okay, the schedule we have, we can make a run. We're keeping these guys. Oh, wait a second. You're going to give us what? All right, now maybe we'll trade the guy. But if you lose this game, then I think if some team wants a draft pick or two for a couple of these guys, you got to do it. I mean, you have to, because that's where the Jets are going to be rebuilding. They're going to have some money to spend next year, but they're not going to have the type of money that they had last year. So a lot more personnel is going to have to come through the draft next year.
Agreed.
So you have to, and we don't have enough draft picks. I think we only have, I don't even know if we have 7 draft picks next year. I don't know if we have 6 or 7. We've made a few of these deals the last couple of years. So we don't really have a whole lot. We have about average. So I think we're going to have to make some moves, but we have one more week to figure it out. What do you think is going to happen before I let you go with the Jacksonville game? Is it going to depend on offensive line injuries, whether Beachum comes back, or do you think it doesn't matter?
Jacksonville D hasn't been particularly great. They haven't been as good as I thought they'd be this year. But if the Jets' offensive line isn't up to be remotely close to full strength, I don't foresee them doing what New England did, but I do think that Darnold's going to have a ton of pressure. And I don't foresee the Jets winning the game unless they can get unless Beachum and guys like that are healthy. And the offensive line plays a lot better than it did last week. If the line plays somewhat similar to what it did against Dallas, then I think the Jets could go ahead and beat Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think if Beachum doesn't play, then I think the Jets. I think because he makes all the difference in the world with this offensive line, and I look, because Decemberlay is not coming back, so we have to deal with that. I don't know whether or not they're going to put anybody else in there, as bad as it was last week, because Alex Lewis can't be 100%. A lot of talk about whether he would even play, so that's probably the case as well. He's probably not even playing at anywhere near like 100% health. So I think it's important Beachum plays. I think they have a shot if the offensive line with Beachum is serviceable enough. But without Beachum, the offensive line is a joke, and they're going to need to take the game away from a rookie quarterback, which they should, because this is a rookie quarterback. These are the games you have to win. Even if you're an average football team, and I hope we're at least an average football team with Sam Darnold, a quarterback.
I would hope.
I would hope. All right, we all hope. Jan, that'll wrap it up. So enjoy the game, by the way, next week, if you can. I don't know if you'll be able to enjoy it. And,
okay.
And we'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds good.
Take care.